Our session this week is supposed to be dedicated to seeing an example of a Christian-based theory. That is, Christian-based in the sense explained in the last 2 weeks. And to do that, I have to sketch some background ideas. These were assigned in the reading, but I need to mention 2 background ideas to getting a Christian view of government. That's going to be our example this week. A view of the state. The state is the old term for the political legal institution in society, the institution that makes the laws. The 2 background ideas are explained in the Myth of Religious Neutrality under the section on sphere sovereignty and under the section called Encapsis. Let me just say a brief word about these. Sphere sovereignty was Abraham Kuyper's term for recognizing that God has created the world and human beings such that humans always have some sort of authority. They see some sort of authority in the different phases, aspects of their lives. For example, the first authority that we encounter in our lives are our parents, and then we encounter others. And Kuyper notices that Scripture speaks of these others in an accepting way. So there's not only the authority of parents in a family, but there's the authority of the clergy in a church. There's authority of the owners of a business. There's the authority of the officials in the state. Those are specifically mentioned in the New Testament. And taking that as point of departure, Kuyper points to other areas of life which have their own distinct sort of authorities in them. The teacher in a classroom, say the conductor of an orchestra. And there are many different types of these, corresponding to many different sorts of institutions that we create in society in order to promote and preserve the value of whatever that aspect of life is. So we have the church established that it is the expression of our faith. We have the state, which is concerned with justice. And we have business, which is concerned with the economic side of life. And then there are institutions such as hospitals and care centers that are concerned with health. And we have businesses are concerned with the economic side of life. So there are these many different spheres of authority. And the principle there is that no one sort of authority may interfere in the proper sphere of another. Each it exercises its authority in its own sphere, so that the state is, by our very conception of it in this biblical way, limited. Its power and its authority are limited to matters of public justice. That already delimits the state in an important way, but it's delimited in yet other ways. And the second point that I have to make has to do with how things are related, parts to wholes, and whether that exhausts the way things are related. The oldest expression of this that's been enormously influential in Western thought comes to us from Aristotle. And he says, one thing is a part of another when the part can't come into existence without the whole, or can't function without the whole, or can't be understood without the whole. And that has been accepted by just about everybody I know of ever since. Now, let's think about that. One of the examples that Aristotle himself gives is we're touring a battle. This is a gruesome example. We're touring a battlefield after the battle, and somebody says, "What's that over there?" And the answer is, "That's the thumb of a man." Aristotle says, you see, a thumb is a part of the body. It can't come into existence without the rest of the body. It can't function without the rest. And we can't really understand it apart from what its function would be if it were still attached to a human body. That's a part-whole relation. He then goes on to say that people are parts of the state. And that's what we call a collectivist view. It says that the collection of all the people expressed as parts of the state include all the parts, and the parts all depend on the state to exist. And therefore, what benefits the state is to come first and foremost in a just society. In fact, later on, one place he defines justice as whatever preserves the state. What Dewey has done is to distinguish another kind of relationship, which is not part to whole, but a sub-whole to a greater whole. And he has explained this difference very convincingly. For example, let's take one that will be familiar to everybody. Water is H2O. It's 2 hydrogen atoms and 1 oxygen atom, and they combine to form water. They are not, however, parts of water, are they? Even according to Aristotle, because they exist independently of water. They don't exist only where there's water, only in water. And they have a separate and independent existence. And we bring them together. They can function without one another as well. And they can be understood without being combined. But the combination gives us something new, something that has unpredictable qualities about it, which is typical of putting wholes together to form a greater whole. Characteristics emerge or are exhibited by this whole, which we never would have expected, couldn't have predicted. Putting hydrogen and oxygen together forms water, but there's no way to predict that the water, when made sufficiently cold, will, unlike everything else in the universe, expand rather than contract. No way to anticipate that sort of thing. But we have to distinguish then between the part-whole relationship and the whole to greater whole relationship. Now, the immediate way in which this is important for understanding the proper view of the state and its ability to make laws for people is that human beings who are the citizens of the state are not parts of it. They do not come into existence because of the state. The state does not produce them. It is not that they can't function as humans without the state. It is not that they can't be understood apart from their relationship to the state. So they fail all the tests for being a part. They're not. They're sub-wholes included within a greater whole. And the important thing here is twofold. One is this point I've just made, that human beings as citizens of a state are not parts of it. They are wholes included in a greater whole. And the other is that the other institutions of human society, marriage, family, business, school, labor union, political party, charity, sports team, whatever it is, they also are not parts of one another or of the state. They are wholes encompassed within a greater whole. They have that whole to greater whole relationship rather than the part-whole relationship. Now, these two principles, sphere sovereignty, that is, that there are different kinds of authorities that may not interfere with one another, and that there is another sort of relationship that things have to one another other than part to whole, that is whole to greater whole. Those two lay the background for a uniquely Christian view of a theistic Christian view of what the state should be, how it should be conceived. Now, in the history of Western thought, the theories about the government in a society, about the state, the institutional state, have ricocheted back and forth between two conceptions, both of which we must find as believers in God and as Christians to be false. And these two views are, well, I would say it would almost be funny if it weren't so tragically important. It's a lot like saying which came first, the chicken or the egg. The argument, the fundamental difference between these two views is that the one says that individuals are solitary, are able to exist upon their own, and they freely create the state. And the other says, no, the state is primary, and individuals can't exist without the state. So the question is, which is the basic reality that generates the other? Is it that individuals, in their individual solitude and sovereignty, freely bind together to create something called a state, and they can do just as well with it. Maybe not quite as well, but they can do without it. It's just that the state provides conveniences for them. Or is it that the state is the natural institution? It's the group. And the group produces individuals, and individuals really can't function as humans unless they live in a society that's governed by an institution that works according to laws, that ensures justice, that provides a recourse in case of disputes or protection from crime. Without that, life would be impossible and intolerable. So which one is right? Which one's the source of the other? Now, it seems to me that any theist, any Jew, Christian, or Muslim would answer right away that neither one is the source of the other, because God has created both. And he has created both in relationship to one another. And that's what we heard in the Psalm this morning. God sets the solitary in families. He sets individuals, he creates individuals, but he creates them through families. And so there is a correlation between being an individual and being a member of some family, some social institution, at least the family, and more perhaps. This again seems like such a simple point. It follows not just from Psalm 68 there, but it follows from our knowledge of God as creator. God has brought into existence humans and human society simultaneously. So we have to reject both sides of this. Let's consider them just a little bit more. The collectivist wants to argue that aside from the state, a human being cannot live. Aristotle's way of putting it is this: the solitary individual dies. He later concedes that some extraordinary individuals might be able to survive. If so, they're not humans. They're either animals or gods. And in either case, they should be banned from human society. That's how he gets around those difficulties. He also argues that all the other institutions of society, every other community, is also part of the state. So the state is all-encompassing, all-ruling. It is what we call totalitarian. It governs the totality of life. Individualism arose as a reaction to that. And individualism, as that has come down to Western societies, has come from people such as Thomas Hobbes and John Locke. Hobbes actually argued the reverse of Aristotle. Solitary individuals can survive very easily, he argued. That's the way humans were originally. He even rules out families. Families were not original. It's solitary individuals. He figures that when two people happen to meet up together and were attracted to one another and had sex, then that's how the race keeps producing. No permanent family, no structure. So whereas Aristotle is arguing for the graphic you see on the screen here now, that the state includes all the other institutions and then below them all individuals that belong to them. It's all encompassing. Hobbes argues that just the reverse. And this view that solitary individuals are perfectly capable of existing on their own and not only surviving but prevailing, was encouraged a great deal by a novel, Robinson Crusoe, which was very influential just at the time that individualism was being promulgated by people like Hobbes and Locke. And it's a story of a man who shipwrecked, thrown up on a deserted island, and he not only survives, he prevails. Of course, the story cheats in so many ways. He's tossed up there with clothes. He's tossed up there with rope, with a gun and powder that didn't get wet in the shipwreck, if you can believe that. And he meets people who are native to the island who instantly recognize his superiority instead of having him for lunch. That's a kind of, I said it was cheating. It is, in every respect. It fudges precisely what it would need to have made a case for, and it just assumes it instead. So the individualist view is the opposite of the one that you see here on the screen, but neither one is right according to our principles of sphere sovereignty and the whole to greater whole relationship. We're able to give a better account of humans to the state. On the Hobbes-Locke view, the state, like all other institutions, is created freely by individuals. It's their invention. There is no natural kind of authority in life. People just decide to, for convenience sake, to get together. They give up their own individual right to their own self-defense and their own self-aggrandizement. And when they create an institution that will now be the law enforcing institution. And in Locke's view, it turns out to be much like a private security company. It's not interested in the general good or the welfare of all its citizens. It's just there to protect their lives and property. One advocate, 20th century advocate of individualism was Ayn Rand. And Rand said, once there are no institutions, only individuals and the relationships between them. That, of course, is a self-contradictory statement. These relationships between them are the institutions. The relationship between two married people is their marriage. The relationship between them and their children is the family. The relationship between them and the people who buy and sell them goods has to do with dealing with a business. Yes, there are individuals, and the relationships between them are of many kinds. Marriage, family, business, church, state, labor union, and so on. Individualism is the view that prevailed at the founding of the United States. The founding fathers were, to the man, individualists. When Jefferson wrote the Declaration, he gave an individualist account of legal rights. Rights are what individuals have been endowed with by their creator. Individuals. And very soon after the founding of the country, people realized very rapidly that meant that businesses, labor, a school, a church, had no legal standing in court because they weren't individuals. So they invented what they called the legal fiction. And they said, well, we're going to call corporations, businesses, individuals. They're now individuals, so they have all the rights, and now they can appear in court and bring suit or be sued. Because instead of repairing what was wrong with the theory, namely that it regarded only individuals as having rights, and instead of saying, well, we missed the boat there, other institutions do too, marriages and families, businesses and churches, schools and labor unions and political parties and so on. These also have rights and obligations under the law. Instead, no, they said, we'll just declare businesses individuals and then let them appear in court and have legal rights. That, of course, is not what comes from applying sphere sovereignty and the idea of wholes to greater wholes. And applying also to it the view that God, the creator, is the source of both individuals and the way society is structured. The kind of authority is natural to people, to recognize an authority that decides cases on justice, or gives advice, or does one thing or another and another. In a non-differentiated society like a tribe, the tribal chief or the tribal council combines all of those kinds of authorities. But as society unfolds and develops, each gets recognized, and a distinct kind of authority arises to exercise that in the society and to bring the benefits of it to it. So the Christian view of the state is that the state exists for the purpose of public justice. That's its sphere. It should confine itself only to matters of public justice, and that it is not encompassed in any other institution, nor is any other absorbed by it. I'd like to give one example of a violation of this so that it will try to be clearer. The norm of justice that the state is supposed to enforce has to do with its central core of what is fair. We often call that retributive justice, but that term is also too often confined just to punishment. It doesn't mean that. It just means seeing that people get what they deserve. And then there's distributive justice and proportional justice. So we need all three of these in our idea of the norm of justice, which the state is supposed to enforce by public law within the territory of the people that are its citizens. In doing that, the state should act then as caretaker of its citizens. And I want to give an example of something that violates that. And I can only use the present law of my own country, so this will be US law. And one of the examples of this is our criminal code. Now, the strange thing about this criminal code is not that it forbids crime, but that it provides for the punishment for wrongdoers. But the punishment then is a punishment exacted by and paid to the state, to the government. Now, here's what's weird about that. If I cause an accident, and by that accident, I cause you property loss or bodily harm, I owe you compensation for the property loss or the bodily harm. But according to this criminal code, if I cause you that injury on purpose in order to rob you, I then don't owe you anything. I instead owe a debt somehow to the government. The government may fine me and take the fine. The government may put me in jail and make me serve a sentence. And when my sentence is up, they will say that I have paid my debt to society, where society is just another word for the state. But the fact is, I didn't owe a debt to society. I owed the debt to the person that I harmed. And there's no provision at all in the law for compensation to the injured person or the loss of property of the injured person. I've already gone over my time limit. So I just want to end by reading something that I think is also important to add at this point. And I'm going to read from the Myth of Religious Neutrality, because I can't put it better offhand than I put it here. I've already explained some of the senses in which the sphere sovereignty principle is both broadly theistic and specifically Christian. So I want to be as clear as possible about what I just said concerning that principle, forbidding the state from using its power to favor any one group within the state or to favor any one faith expressed in that state. It means that the Christian view of the state is that the state should not favor Christians or anybody else. The aim of the state should always be to be as fair and even-handed as possible in the treatment of all its citizens. And I felt compelled to read that and close with that, because there is in my own country quite a movement of people that call themselves Christians, and see it as their duty to try to impose their values on others by influencing the government to do exactly that.